Well, I was working at a bar in Calabasas, and I became really good friends with one of the bartenders there. And his best friend was Jay from Bad Religion. We were just about to record our 7-inch, and I remember I went to Jay's just before Suffer was released, and he played me Suffer. I'm like, yeah, it's great, man. It's so good, and yada, yada, yada. And, I'm in this punk band, and then I'll tell you, he was so instrumental with the Collision in the early days.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, if you want to support the podcast, you can for $1 a month over at patreon.com/thiswasthescene. You could also just donate one time over at thiswasthescene.com. Just scroll down on the front page to the purple button, click that, and it'll show you what to do. Rhythm Collision was a three-piece punk rock band from California. They released numerous records on Dr. Strange and a bunch of other labels. Their debut LP was called Pressure in 91, was followed by Now in 93, Clobberer in 95, a live album called Crutch Time in 96, and a CD of B-sides, comps, and 7-inch tracks called Collision Course were also released during the 90s. In 2001, they released a new album called All Bombs Away. I heard of this band because my buddy Rodney Woosley, if you will, went to go see these guys at a high school in Jersey back in like 98, and he was telling us about it and how awesome they were. And that opened my knowledge to what Rhythm Collision was. So there you go, Rodney. Just wanted to give you a shout out there, buddy. I went back and forth with Tony for a little bit trying to get him on the Skype, but our schedules were a little bit kind of nuts. But I finally locked it down, and this is what we talked about. The band being best friends since they were kids, why he chose to play drums, why he's the one running the social media even though he left the band in the 90s, the strategy behind the art on the first 7-inch, how they found Radio Tokyo, Jay Bentley's help with the band, not actually having a look as a band, Dr. Strange's label mates, how their iconic character was developed, why he left the band, playing shows with Green Day, playing with Bad Religion in Mexico, and a ton more. Make sure you stay tuned for the very end because Tony just sent me these 3 bonus stories that he didn't tell me during the interview. So he just recorded them on his phone and sent them to me. And so it's real quick. It's like 2 minutes. But it's at the very end, and you can listen to them after you're done listening to the interview that we did. This week's sponsor is Min 400 Records. Min 400 Records is an indie record label from New Jersey with bands across the United States, Canada, and Europe. The label features everything from indie rock and folk to post-punk and soul. Over 370 exciting releases. You can find Min 400 Records releases streaming at Spotify, Pandora, Tidal, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Deezer, and more, or at all MP3 outlets worldwide. Visit mint400records.com for links and more info. Here's a clip from the song Rooftops by the band Ruby Bones.
It's a nightmare, it's a goddamn tragedy. There's a danger in the doorway, and it's all you'll ever see. You see, I remember in the autumn underneath.
Thank you, Neil, for being awesome and constantly supporting this podcast. If you'd like to sponsor the podcast, you can just email thiswasthescene@gmail.com. Finally, if you're a fan of my old band Lanemeyer, we have a bunch of vinyl left from our Stories for the Big Screen pressing done by I Surrender Records, which is Rob Hitt's label from Midtown. It's green vinyl, and side A has the whole record, and side B has an etching of God, I Miss You, God, I Miss This Place. Yes, you can go to isurrenderrecords.com, or you can just click the link in the show notes. It'll take you right there. We're slowly getting to the point where we're going to run out, so this is going to be a one-time pressing. If you want to get it, again, just go to isurrenderrecords.com, and you can find it there. Feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. So what do you do now? Like, what's your...
I'm a GM. I'm a GM and operator, and so basically I open restaurants, train the staff, and then open other restaurants. So basically I've been opening restaurants for the last decade.
Oh, shit. So last year must have been quite fun.
Yeah, torture.
Jesus
yeah, it's
Christ.
brutal. It's a shit show. It's pretty rough. It's just it's a tough industry as it is, and most restaurants fail. Then you throw a pandemic in there, then you throw up all these other issues your way during a pandemic, and you've got CDC guidelines to adhere to, and seating restrictions, capacity issues. Yeah, and it was impossible to survive as it was. Now it's just compounded with all these other issues, which is just, a lot of them out of our control. But it's tough. It's the hiring. I mean, the restaurants are busy. It's just trying to hire people that are not looking for work right now. That's the toughest thing.
That's crazy. Like that's happening. I'm in North Carolina, and I was talking to someone yesterday who works. I was at a restaurant, and they were telling me about that too. I mean, that's like all across the board.
Yeah. And I mean, so a lot of people are now just holding out and saying, listen, whatever position is, I deserve X amount of dollars now. You know what I mean? So now they want more money to come into a restaurant because now it's, they're at risk and they know that they have a little bit of leverage because no one else is looking. And so now the same position is paying $4 or $5 more an hour. Not only are you slow as a restaurant because of the pandemic and the restrictions, then all the employees or the ones you do hire all want more money to work in that environment. So now you're making less money and paying out more. So yeah, it's just a tough industry.
Jesus Christ. I mean, I was kind of figuring like it's everyone. I was like, people do realize they're get this whole the money's going to run out and they're going to have to actually start going to work again. So it's like,
yeah, I mean, the stimulus and the unemployment's going to run out and then eventually have to get back to it. And then, yeah, it's a challenge to say the least.
Well, hopefully this interview will take your mind off of it for a minute.
Yeah. I'd like to get back to the stuff that I enjoy. Yeah, exactly.
Are you still playing at all, or?
Up until last year, yeah, I played a lot.
Shit.
Yeah, many bands and did records with a ton of bands, and yeah, not a lot of touring, but a lot of shows. And yeah, up until last year, I was playing consistently. Yeah, with different bands.
So this is so the structure of this is really just kind of a timeline of the band and talking about just really going back to the beginning and how you got involved in the scene, how the band started, kind of just go through the whole lifespan of it and like little stories here and there. Definitely want to talk about Doctor Strange. I've been trying to get him on this for a while, and we were going back and forth, and it's just like he kind of just disappeared
tough.
for a minute. Yeah, even like I guess someone else is still working at the label or his assistant. They're like, yeah, it's impossible to try to get him.
Yeah, I mean, we talk pretty regularly. I shouldn't say regularly, but every few weeks, I'm still an avid vinyl collector. So, and also I was trying to put out like a best of Rhythm Collision. And so I reached out to him and to see if he'd be interested. And he said 100%, but I'm too slammed to do it. I've got all this, you know what I mean? So yeah, we're in touch for sure.
Oh shit. Well, you'll have to nudge him. I think when this comes out, hopefully there'll be a bit of a little bit of people hitting him up like, hey, it's like when you're saying you want to put together something, I think, I've had some people talk about that in these interviews, and all of a sudden it kind of like got the ball rolling or lit the fire to make it start happening.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, there's not a big demand. No one's knocking down our door for like Rhythm Collision releases. I mean, it's just like at this point, I do it for nostalgia, and I do it because I want to do it, really. And if somebody picks up a new CD, or great, but I do it. A lot of it, I do it for myself and the band because now everything is digital and it's available where it wasn't before. And just recently, I put out another Collision CD that we never had on CD because they weren't available. We made a mistake by throwing our first record onto our second because we figured, well, it'll fit, and people that didn't get a chance to buy the first one can get it as a bonus. But that was kind of a mistake. We should have released our first record as its own entity on a CD, which we never did. So I did do that last year. I put it out on my own I've been kind of active in that sense.
So are you running all the social media, like the Facebook and the
Instagram? I mean, pretty much. Yeah. The other guys are, they're not married, but they got a lot of kids and a lot going on. So it's like, and I don't have any kids, and that obviously frees up a lot of time for me. So basically it's more of a time thing than it is like, hey, will you do the social media stuff? Or I just kind of took it over only because I had time to do it, really.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. It's like all my buddies that were in my old band, they all have kids, and actually, no, I can't say that because my drummer doesn't have kids, but he's just too busy with his own shit. So it's like, yeah, I totally get it. Like I started the social media and take care of it because it's like super fun. Especially now, it's like there's so much fun stuff you can do. Because I saw on your Facebook you were uploading videos and you asked if people had old flyers, and it's cool because it comes in randomly, but once it finally comes in, you post it. It's like holy shit, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's weird how certain things will trigger a response and others won't. You'll throw up something silly and you'll get a bunch of hits, and you'll put something out that's pretty serious and no one will react to it, or they won't respond to it, or, I get it. People are busy, and it's not like we're in the forefront of the scene anymore, and many people have moved on. So I get it, but it's a science. Social media is a science. If you overwhelm people, they shut down. If you don't do it enough, they forget about you. So you just got to do little spurts here and there. And I try to keep the band alive a little bit, the best I can. And it's still a huge passion. We were best friends from elementary school, so it's still a big part of what we do.
Well, let's talk about, so that's a good way to start to go back to the beginning. I used to structure it where I used to talk about how people got into music, but I started getting rid of that and I started just going right into where you personally got into the scene. And it's always led with, did you get involved in the scene because of the band, or did you get involved in the scene and then started the band later on?
Yeah, we got into the scene first. I then got into the band. That's how it happened. And I remember, I think it was, we were best friends from elementary school, really. Like Corey, the bass player, and myself would go back to like second grade. And then I think in middle school, we met Harlan. I think in middle school, and I introduced Corey to Harlan. And then that's kind of how the three of us became best friends throughout all of our school years.
So you guys, so the three of you found the scene together, or did one, like, who was the first person who
I
found
think
it and said, hey,
I
check
think
this out?
Harlan found it first. I think I was second and Corey third. I think I could be wrong on that order, but Harlan for sure, because I remember distinctly, even in middle school, he would bring a flyer to work with the Circle Jerks at the Cuckoo's Nest, and I remember the flyer, and I said I would make fun of the name Circle Jerks Cuckoo Nest, and I would make fun of it, and then like within months, that all turned around for me. So I think Harlan got into it first.
Was there anybody of the three of you that was like just immediately went into and got involved, like totally absorbed all the punk rock stuff, and then maybe one of you was just like, I'll go to this because something to do, but I still want to listen to like this music instead.
No, I think no, we were all pretty gung ho. Harlan pretty much kind of set the tone, and he was really committed right out of the gate. And then I kind of got it from him and his passion for it, really. And then I think Corey was the same way. I think we all like different bands for different reasons. It was really strange. Like I got into the Clash, just as Corey did, but Corey was a little more avid Clash fan than I was even, and then I became an avid Clash fan like 20 years later when I became even more into the Clash. So it's weird how all of us had our own, like Harlan and I were huge Stiff Little Fingers Damned fans, like huge. We followed, just obscure bands, and we did research, and Harlan and I would go to record stores where they would have old clippings of all the UK magazines, because our favorite bands were all from the UK. So we loved the LA hardcore scene, but we were more into the more melodic stuff and into the Buzzcocks and that kind of thing, and the Ruts and all these bands, the Vibrators and Lurkers and all these 76, 77, 79 UK stuff. And we would spend hours going through clippings and cutting them out. I mean, we were very serious about this. And then we got into this record collecting. And then Harlan and I kind of got into a little bit of a non-verbal competition on who would collect the most vinyl, even though it was never really a spoken word thing. I always thought, oh, he got that, man, I got to get this. And we spent a lot of time taking the bus when we weren't driving yet into record stores and searching for records. And yeah, it was crazy. And Corey was not so much into the record collecting and that as we were, for sure. It was Harlan and I think, for the most part. Corey was the Dead Kennedys Clash fan. Like that, those were in his two biggies.
If one of you had a record, would the other just not buy it because of that, or would you try to match?
No, not at all. No. We would, a lot of times we would go together, and he, whoever tracked down the record and went home with it. But then, you just make cassettes for your friends and, whatever at that point, and you share it. But it wasn't that big of a competition. It was just one of those.
What year was that? Was that because I read something, I was looking through I have like a ton of tabs open about you guys and just kind of like putting the pieces together, but it said you guys formed in the 80s.
Yeah.
Okay, but it said like 84.
That's too early. But I'm not sure if that's too early, to be honest. I mean, 87, I have a video from my first girlfriend's garage in 87, a video. So you're looking at 85, 86, probably. 84 might be a little early, but I know 85 that might be tail end of 84, because 85 we were just starting to learn our instruments, and then it seems a little early, but I would be closer to 85, I think.
That's that's a whole different era. Like for you guys to start there and then go all through the 90s, I mean, you saw this whole thing morph, and then your sound basically fit that time. Because I mean, I'm even looking at the posters and stuff, which we'll get into later, but it looks like the way it's set up, it looks like you guys were the headliner over 10 Foot Pole and Good Riddance. It like the way the flyer is. Like, I don't know if that's true, but it seems like
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I was out of the band at that point. So I don't know. That's how they did the flyers. The headliner was listed first, the bigger, but I mean, I know we got bigger later. I don't know if we were that big. We were headlining over Good Riddance, but 10 Foot Pole, perhaps, you know what I mean? But yeah, I don't know. I'd have to ask the guys. They would know for sure.
So then how did you guys like form the band? Because you got into the scene and then you started going to shows, and then did that like one of you say like, yeah, we need to do this, like we should
Yeah,
start
I
playing?
think I bought a drum set. If I remember correctly, I bought the drum set first. My sister loaned she got a loan and got me the drum set. And I got the stainless steel Pearl export kit, and I got it, and which no one ever picked up on because it was the same kit as Topper Heaton. He had a Pearl stainless steel kit. No one ever really picked up on that, but that's why I got that first kit. So, or second kit, technically. So my first real kit, my sister actually got a loan for me to get it. But I remember correctly, I think I got the drums first, and we rehearsed in my sister's bedroom when she graduated and moved on. Then later on, we got rehearsal spaces, but we were like nobody. I mean, the same story really in a lot of bands. You practice in your mother's garage, your sister's bedroom, and you eventually learn how to play and you move on. We had toilet paper rolls taped to a post as a mic stand to hold microphones. Like you're talking, we didn't know. I mean, you just don't know what you're doing. I mean, like, okay, a mic stand, we didn't have money, so we're not going to go buy equipment. And that's what we did. It was like crazy, but
Actually, that reminded me like one time like me and my buddy were playing, and just to kind of like mirror what you're talking about, I think he ended up, we didn't have a mic stand, so we just hung it from my downstairs had hooks in the ceiling because of plants.
Yeah.
And so we would just like hook it on that and then have it just be like hanging there to practice.
Which is even rougher because the way mics work.
Yeah.
You're not getting, you got to look, unless it's a condenser mic, that's a little different, but I mean, looking back, I don't know if kids nowadays, I don't know if there is creative, like, because everything is available. You had to do what you had to do. Now you just go to the store and get whatever you want, eBay, whatever it is. Then I mean, not that we're 80 years old, but then you had to like figure it out, and that was part of the love of it too. You're just scrapping and scraping, and we were pretty gung ho about it. I remember our conversations like, are you committed? Are you committed? Yeah, we're committed. And the tours, and it took a life as, I mean, that was it. I gave up, like, I was really into like sports at the time, and I gave everything up, surfing, everything, like, for music. Everything took a back seat at that point.
Why? Like, why'd you just go so hardcore into music instead of sports?
You can't, it's just one of those things. You can't put your finger on it. It just hits you and you wake up.
Yeah.
And that's over. I mean, I remember I heard a song from the Stoodle. I still remember when I heard it and what song I heard. And I was in an assembly, and this guy who was a little older, he was into punk rock, and he put his headphones on, and I go, what are you listening to? And he put it in my head. I'm like, holy, that was the end of that. And I was like a Stiff Little Fingers fan for life. And those little stories are, sometimes they set your path and you just don't realize. I mean, we used to sit there with a tape recorder and listen to Rodney and the Rock, and we discovered a lot of bands through Rodney and the Rock. That guy should have gotten credit. He still doesn't get enough credit for what he exposed all of the young kids to, the punk rock. We would have never heard a lot of bands if it wasn't for him.
So you guys met when you were how old again? Like second grade? Or like 10 years old?
Corey and I met first. Yeah, we were in second grade.
Jesus. So like was there like, did you guys ever do like put on fake concerts and shit before you got into the scene and just been like, oh, we want to be in a band together one day?
No, not really. We didn't I mean, we would, you're just young kids at that point, and the music wasn't a huge part of that. Not obviously in second grade, it wasn't really on the radar. And then once, middle school, I think is when it started.
So why'd you choose drums? It's like the most fucking hard, it's like the hardest instrument.
Yeah, I regret it now. No, but because I just the guys I gravitated toward. Whenever I listened to stuff, I just always went. It's a little different for me now. I always listen to the drummer, the first thing, and that's just one of those things that when I listen to Clash, I listen to the drums, and when I listen to the even Agent Orange or LA Hardcore, whatever it was always the drums that I kind of listened for, and then I like the aggression of it too. I was always a kind of a physical guy playing football. I was just the aggression and the physical aspect of it is what really kind of led me to it.
I was thinking that because you said you were really big into sports, and it seemed like that's probably the most athletic instrument to play.
Right. Yeah. You have to be in shape, and I mean, now guys are if you talk to Travis, I mean, he's got a whole routine. I mean, he's got cardio. I mean, you need to be on your game, man. I mean, it's physical. It's a little different when you're younger because you can wing it. You know what I mean? But as you get older and you're like, late 20s, then your early 30s, I mean, you can't just sit on a drum stool for, and just play hardcore. You really have to be in some kind of condition. I mean, it's exhausting and all those other things, but not in your teens and 20s. You can just, you can wing it. But as you got older, you realize that, you got to you got to get into some kind of shape for this.
So real quick too, because you had said, because I know you guys had been through a bunch of members, and there's really not a lot online that's like explaining the timeline stuff. So I'm gonna just ask this, and we're gonna go back again. So like, what year were you actually like? Did you leave the band, get kicked out of the band? I don't know that story.
I left it. I quit. I quit at like 94, I think.
Okay, so okay,
Early 94.
Okay,
during a recording of
Clobberer.
Holiday. No, just before Clobberer. Before Clobberer. So I remember.
Well, let's not talk about that yet. I want to work up to that. I want to get up to that. I just want to make sure, because I want to make sure the time, because I don't want to ask you questions that we're going to go like far surpass like where you were like, I don't really know. But it's also interesting though, because if you were out of the band then, I mean, this is kind of relevant for right now. Then how are you the one that's doing all the social media stuff? How did you decide?
Nobody else was doing it, and I don't have like. We didn't leave under, horrific conditions, and you know what I mean? We're friends, and so yeah, I think, but those guys are all admins. They can post whatever they want whenever they want. Maybe they just don't have interest, or
I just find it like so interesting. Like usually when someone leaves the band in either way, I've never heard of that person taking the torch later on and running the stuff that's like now. That's just interesting.
Right. They run, but they run the other way. And they detach themselves from the whole. No, I'm proud of what we did. I'm proud of the band. I love my friends, and I love what they did after. Even though it was only a year or so or whatever it was. Yeah, I never ever thought about that. Yeah, never. I'm going to post some stuff, and we're all friends, and yeah, I mean everybody can post whatever they want whenever they want, and yeah, it was never an issue really. I never really thought about it.
I mean, it tells a lot though for someone. I mean, that's such a positive thing to hear that. Like if. It kind of sets the tone for really what the band was. If you guys are buddies since second grade, and then we'll get into like leaving the band, and then years later you're running the social media, but you create it and say, hey, it's an open door for all of you. Like that kind of just shows really how connected you guys were or still are.
Yeah, no, I agree. We're not as connected as we'd like to be, because it's life gets in the way, and that's a story of many, many, many people, I'm sure. You go in different directions, but we're fortunate enough that we're still in the same state. You know what I mean? It might be different if it was like that. And we never had big falling outs and all that kind of thing. So it might have been different if you had like a horrible breakup and everyone's bitter. And we were just fortunate that wasn't the case for us.
Okay.
So I think that's also why we were able to continue communicating. And also, they may just, I never really talked about them. They may just not have any interest in it. You know what I mean? They have kids and they moved on, and I'm the only one that didn't. I don't know. So, that could be it. Yeah. That's really never really thought about it. Just, I mean, I don't spend that much time on it. You know what I mean? It's like something will come up and I'll post it, but it's not like I wake up and own the page and what am I going to say today? I don't really, to be honest, give it that much thought. If something comes across that I think is interesting, I'll try to post, you know what I mean? That I think will be fun, and the flyers and old videos and things like that people, and just fun, silly stuff to keep conversations going about the band, and that we're all proud of and that we liked. And yeah, it's nothing really more than that.
So you guys got together, start playing. How long did it take you before you actually got like good at drums where you guys could start playing live?
We were never really good at our instruments before we started playing live. I'm going to tell you that one. And I don't think anybody will tell you that they were great you just struggle through it.
Yeah.
You just, as soon as you start, like a lot of bands, you start doing covers so you can learn your instrument, right? And you start learning covers. So I think we learned like the Saints, I'm Stranded, and the Buzzcocks, and some of our favorite, and we played some obscure stuff like that that no one would ever, like the Radiators. We covered a song called Love Detective, and these are like really obscure, like UK bands. Even if you're a big UK punk fan, you might not have heard of them. You know what I mean? We really did our research and tracked bands down that were different and that were not part of the scene out here. And we covered bands. And we're like, no one's going to know this. And we're like, we didn't care. It wasn't like we were trying to cover like Green Day, so everybody would sing along. You know what I mean? Or something. we were covering bands, and I'm sure people thought that we wrote them because no one had ever heard of them.
Was that like a reason though? Like, would you guys do that because you were just like thinking like this is the punk rock thing to do, or like what was the reason you chose to do that?
It's a good song, and we wanted to play it. Basically, that's a great song. Let's learn it. That's it. It's that simple. Yes, yeah. It's like that's a great tune. Let's try to play that. So, yeah. But yeah, it was probably at least a year after we got together consistently. Like consistency, I'd say once a week, and we were never practiced like animals. Like you hear bands, I've got a lot of biographies and I read everything, and you're talking about Black Flag and Descendants would practice like 8 to 10 hours a day for like 6, 7 days a week. And those guys can play. And we're talking, we play after school for 2 hours a week. I mean, granted, that's probably why we weren't, the greatest musicians, and we also didn't care to be at that point. Yeah. Then once we started actually playing shows and getting with Dr. Strange, we went into a rehearsal studio. And then that was still every Thursday at Uncle's in the Valley. And that was every Thursday. It was like, whatever it was, 5 to 8. And that was it, man. Three hours. And that was it. Yeah. It's surprising that we did so much because we're still all going to school. I mean, those were still priorities. I mean,
This is high school or this was college when you guys were?
this was at that point, when we finally went into rehearsal studios, I think we were all like first year in college. I think when we finally started taking it really seriously. In the beginning, it's like a lot of other bands do. It's just fun. And then all of a sudden, wait a minute, somebody said that was a good song. Like, did somebody ask for that song again? So you really don't know what you have until other people say, you guys sound pretty good. And we're like, really? You're like, huh. And then you start taking yourself a little bit more seriously. We had a friend of ours in high school that wrote for a punk rock magazine, and she gave us some good pub. And then we're like, hey, maybe we're onto something here. Accidentally.
So when did you guys actually record your first? Because so what I'm showing is that the Nowhere 7-inch is the first thing you guys put out on Incognito Records.
No.
Or you also have Irrepressible too.
No, those are later. Those were like middle years. No, the first 7-inch was just
the Rhythm
self-titled.
7. Yeah, okay, wait, I scrolled down too much. All right, so it was that and then A Look Away. Okay.
Correct. And then Look Away. And then I think Irrepressible, and then Girl with the Purple Hair or something of that. So no, I think it might have been 33 Up and Down. And then Girl with the Purple Hair.
I didn't realize how many fucking releases you guys had. You guys have so many. You had like so
There were a
many
lot of
7-inches.
splits too. There were a few splits. I think later on, like Attack from Both Sides was a split. I think there was a couple splits as well, which was popular back then, I think, which not so much now, I don't believe. But here and there, you'll get a split. But the splits were kind of cool. The split 7-inches were cool.
So like for the first release, like how did that come about?
So basically, we just kept plugging away. And when we thought we had 3, 4, 5 good songs that were worth, listening to, we actually demoed a few at a friend's house that was a musician and said, I can, if you want to record, you can just come over and just lay them down and see what you guys think. And so we demoed a couple songs that we never released, but that was our first example of our second. Actually, the first goes way back, where my sister's boyfriend was in like a big rock band and he had a studio. So we went in there and he programmed, at that point, he wasn't recording live drums. So we programmed a drum machine and recorded a couple demos just to hear our voices back, like, and see what it would sound like and play guitar. And that was our first instance. And this guy was in a big rock band and had a home studio, but with no drums. So we did like a drum machine and demoed some stuff. And then like a year or so after, we had a friend of ours that actually had a studio, and we recorded on their drums and a lot of their instruments, and did some more demos that we'd never released either. And then after that, we released the 7-inch.
How fucking badass was that when you guys had like the 7-inch in your hands?
No, it's like nothing else. You think, oh, we're actually in a band. Yeah, it sucks because you think your story is like so cool, and then everybody else has the same story. Yeah, man, wait till you get your first 7-inch and you smell it and you have the wax. I'm like, yeah, we felt the same way. So it's true though. You get it and you're like, man, yeah, it was we ripped off the Clash big time on the cover of our first on purpose. And, we used to joke like, well, look at ours. Ours is like a double rip. But we purposely put and try to separate ourselves from a lot of the LA stuff, like the Pennywises and stuff, because we just weren't really into that. We could appreciate it. I could appreciate actually more now than I actually did then, and separate ourselves from the LA stuff. And all of our clippings on our walls and our bedrooms and stuff, we took photos of and used that as the background of the 7-inch, so people would understand and go, oh, okay, they're into this kind of music too. That's kind of cool. Not that, it'd be we weren't going to put Black Flag posters up. We were not avid fans, even though they were influences in one way or another. But we made an effort to make sure that people knew that we were more into the UK 76, 77 to 80 punk rock. So that's what we did on the back of that single.
So I'm looking at it right now because it's on Discog. So whose idea was it to come up with the names? You got Kid Collision, Major Collision, and Skin Mangler.
The idea was just from Captain Sensible, basically. I think a lot of some of those bands did that back in the UK, but I think Captain Sensible is how it started, and we thought that was kind of cool, and it was basically tongue in cheek and kind of funny. And I'm not sure if my name was given to me by a guy that came and saw us play early on. And he's like, man, you're just like the skin mangler, just banging away at this. And it just kind of stuck. I'm not sure how. I mean, we got away from that pretty quickly. It was more of a joke. We probably shouldn't have done it in hindsight.
I was gonna ask you that. I was like, did that stick for a while? And you're like, ah, son of a bitch.
Nah, people were going, hey, skin. Nah, it really never really, never really took off. So we kind of dumped that pretty quick. It was more for fun than anything. We thought it was kind of cool, like a Captain Sensible thing and thinking of names. But yeah, we kind of moved away from that rather quickly.
You get the 7-inch, and so it says in it, like, let me see this again. I'm opening it because I just saw something with Doctor Strange, but that looks like that's the next release where it was like split. Yeah, so it's Collision Records, and that was like your guys' label, right?
Yeah. So yeah, the short story is that we're like, well, where do we record this darn thing? Right? You don't know where to go. We're very fortunate that we got lucky, and I started going through records and looking for local studios and looking at the back of different records. And I came across an All record, and I'm looking at it, I'm listening to it. I'm thinking, you know what? This is like the first time in punk that you can actually hear the kick drum. That style, it was always buried, and I always hated that. And that was the first time in the way they recorded it, that the kick drum really came out. And so I said, where did they record this? I'm like, oh, Venice Beach. And I just found them on it was either Yellow Pages or whatever. We weren't Googling back then. And I called them up, and I said, we're in a punk band. I mean, I know you guys recorded, I think it was All, or I can't remember Descent. I can't remember what 12-inch it was that I heard. And they're like, yeah, that's, we do this, we did that band. We're like, oh yeah, we like those guys. Big Drill Car recorded there. And like, there's a huge list of big bands that, like the Doughboy, like there were some big bands that recorded there. And it was just kind of one of those, we found out years later, I'm like, wow, they recorded that there too, and that there too, and that there. Like, holy. So this little studio called Radio Tokyo in Venice that we ended up recording our first 7-inch.
That's fucking wild. Yeah, I mean, that's like how it went. Like, those names weren't really big until you look at them now, and you're like, holy shit, that's crazy. But like back then, it wasn't in your face as much as it is now. Yeah,
and you're just grabbing like, oh, that's right. Because we're still, I mean, a little bit of historian. Like, I'll look at the back of records to this day and go, okay, where did they record this? I'm like, wow, Radio Tokyo too. And you find out, like, that's crazy. I know the first Big Drill Car was there, and like a lot of other bands that I can't off the top of my head remember. It escapes me at the moment. But yeah, some really great bands. And we found out those are years later that was the only reason we ended up at Radio Tokyo and found out it was like a nice little hotbed. And then I was lucky enough to meet, Jay Bentley from Bad Religion. And that was a whole other level. That's a whole other story. Great stories though.
Wait, what's that story?
Well, I was working at a bar in Calabasas, and I became really good friends with one of the bartenders there. And his best friend was Jay from Bad Religion.
Jesus.
So we were just about to record our 7-inch, and I remember I went to Jay's, and he was just before Suffer was released, and he played me Suffer. I'm like, yeah, it's great, man. It's so good, and yada, yada, yada. And, I'm in this punk band, and then I'll tell you, he was so instrumental with the Collision in the early days. Like he would take like the mailing list from Epitaph and like hand me the mailing list and say, mail it to all these guys. Like he was so helpful in those early days of getting us shows. Like we were playing bigger shows our first year than we did at the end of the Collision because of the relationship with Jay. He put us on these huge shows, and we had no business being on those shows at that time with our experience and releases and following at that time.
Holy shit. That's crazy.
Yeah, he was just a good guy. And we played the country club with, No Effects and Bad Religion. And then we played at Mexico. It was all because, the relationship we had with Jay, and he liked the band, and, we were friends, and big help in the early days.
So how did you like, actually it's funny too, because I just finished listening to Do What You Want Again, the book they put out. And so I'm just like kind of putting the timeline together when they're like, Suffer's about to come out. So, and he's working at Epitaph, and it's like he's having this like riff with Greg at the time, or I'm sorry, with Brett at the time. And so it's just like, that's crazy because like that's the bigger picture, but then there's like these sub stories where they're like, they're kind of describing a year in a sentence, and then within that, you're meeting him, and he's he's liking your band. You're like, wait a minute, that's crazy. Like that just plugs into that whole timeline. That's nuts.
Yeah, I would meet him at Epitaph, and I went into the warehouse and stuff, and all those stories about stuff in envelopes and the first Bad Religion, and we would see all that stuff just unfolded in front of us. Like I remember we were at West Beach recording our Pressure record, and then that's when No Effects was coming out with the S&M Airlines, and I heard it, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. Still think that's their best, but it was all previous. It was just as all these bands, Chemical People and all these bands were recording at West Beach and putting stuff out. And at that point, it was just a cookie cutter. It was good and bad. You have like those bands in the UK that everybody played the Roxy, right? Or everybody played at the Cuckoo's Nest and, whatever it is in LA growing up. And then everybody recorded at the same studios because there was only a handful of those to go around. So then once the word got out, that everybody recorded there. So you could tell, oh, that's recorded at West Beach. Or that was recorded there because it was a certain template because there weren't that many other labels around. But so kind of hurt us a little bit, not us in general, but the scene, I think, because a lot of the bands started sounding the same production wise.
So did you guys get popular because of like, was it a mix of things of like, Jay liking your band or just the fans in general or just people in the scene in general, just like digging your music and just that
yeah,
was
it was
the way
just
it
that.
went?
Yeah. He wasn't the kind of guy who's going to, here, you should listen to these guys. He was helpful in the sense, I'll get you the show, but after that, you're on your own. I'll put you on the bill and blah, blah, blah. And Brett was obviously, we weren't friends with Brett, but he was friendly, and we were trying to get signed to Epitaph when we were recording our second album. And he was like, wait till you guys get a bigger following and those kind of things. So we were friendly with all those guys, but they were helpful in the sense, business helpful, but they were never like pushing our record or that kind of scenario. So no, it was all us and just getting the word out. And then we did a lot of interviews. We did like Pepperdine radio TV shows, and we play anywhere and everywhere. It's like every band. We're playing in closets and KXLU and an elevator and like just
wow.
Yeah, and your word eventually gets out. When it's underground and people find out about it, it starts spreading. So word just got out eventually that these guys are pretty good. They're kind of catchy.
So when did you guys start touring?
I think it was 90. It was the first tour.
Where'd you guys go?
I think it was the Pacific Northwest was our first. And then our second one was like 92 or 93. 93 was the second, I think. We did Gilman. That was our first like out of our local neck of the woods show. Is playing in Berkeley. So the Gilman shows were always huge. So we played there, I don't know, maybe half a dozen times, maybe something of that sort. And then we did our first tour, and Harlan was friends with a guy that had a minivan or a RV, and he loaned us his RV. And then, same old story, broke down in Montana. You had to go down like 20 miles of like steep incline, but no brakes in a van. It didn't go over 40, this RV, and we toured all over the place. Never went over 40.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was crazy. So it was smoke coming out of it. It was just this. For a first tour, we were fortunate to someone give us an RV. We could have been in a car for who knows what. I can't remember the name of the band that loaned us it was either the Bad Town Boys or I can't remember who it was that loaned Harlan the van. Just said, here you go.
It's amazing, like the stupid shit that you like put up with when you're a starting band and you're young. You're like, oh, this is just so cool. We don't care that there's no air conditioning. It's 1,000 degrees outside, or vice versa. Or it's just
you didn't care.
Yeah, it's like you literally didn't care. But then later on, it starts happening. You're like, all right, now I'm starting to fucking care. Like,
yeah, like can't we get
sucks.
that? Like we're gonna sleep in a hotel. Let's put our money together and get a hotel this night. Yeah, then you start caring. Sure. Yeah, for sure. In the beginning, it's cool, right? I mean, it's the coolest thing. I mean, we were going into Canada, and I remember that once we finally got into Canada, there's the border checkpoints getting into the country, and we were like, uh-oh. So we started stashing all of our records and merchandise so they didn't tax us on it on the way in and out. And so we would stash it in the toilet. So we hid everything in the toilets. Going through the border patrol, the mirrors on the outside of the RV were too big to go through, and we didn't really notice until too late. Smack right into the border. So the border patrol comes out. What are you guys doing? Back it up. Can't fit that thing through here. Then they started looking through the van. They didn't find anything, but eventually we like pushed the mirrors in or took them off or something to get through the border, but smacked right into it. And then we were filming the border patrol coming on, and she's like, turn that thing off. I'm like, oh, okay.
That was like the constant thing with any band you ever talk to. I mean, I guess like now you can't get into Canada at the moment, but like every band has to hide their merch, or they like ship it over and then like grab it
Right.
on the other end because they just like don't want to pay all the fucking taxes. So like,
Yeah,
how did
exactly.
all this like, actually, no, before I ask this question, like how did you like the scene back then because you went up and down the West Coast, and when I got into the scene, it was like the mid to like late 90s. So California was always on our radar because that's when video comps were coming out, and we got to take a look at what it was like. NoFX's, they were playing live shows and just recording shows, and it just looked so fucking cool out there. Like, what was your perspective in that time of what the California and like the West Coast scene was like?
It was booming. And all those bands we thought were good too. Those guys, you know, I mean, all the Orange County bands and stuff. There wasn't a lot from our side of the, you know, it was mostly Orange County and LA that had a great scene, but all those bands were doing well too. And they were touring and pulling in a lot of people. And then we were never really, I would watch the drummers and I would be impressed by the drummers, but I always thought, and I would watch them just to learn. And so I would watch the drummers but we were never, very rarely did we go into, we always thought we were going to be the best band on the bill, like every other band has, I'm sure. And our goal, and we were serious about, is to try to blow out whoever was headlining. And that's probably no different than a lot of bands. But
how did you think you were going to do that? Like, was it stage presence? Was it being tight? Like, what was your...
Just the tunes, just the style. We thought that our style was just a little different than we weren't super fast. We made an effort not to be just super fast. So we weren't into that mid-tempo melodic stuff, but we weren't like hardcore. So we were right into this little gap in between that we thought that's just what we liked. And they got a little faster after I left, but we were never really like super, super into just the crazy hardcore stuff. Speed wise, we always thought melodic wise that we had, to us, that was an edge for us, that we'd be a little bit catchier in that sense, right or wrong. Who knows if that was the case, but we always thought that was it, that our songs would be a little catchier. Not really. We didn't really think, oh, well, stage prep. We were what we were really. We didn't really practice like stage moves or like, we just did what we did and whatever came out. And yeah, the mistake that we did make is that we should have, and we were talking about this a couple months ago, Harlan and I, is that we should have had a little bit more of a uniformity, not a uniform, but we should have had some kind of look that identified us as a band, whether it's all shorts or like something. We all had just dressed any way we wanted to, which was the punk ethos. I get it, but it would have been cool in hindsight to look back and had like some kind of like tight knit. We were too casual. Sometimes we'd wear like shorts and like a surfer thong. It was just too casual. Should have took it a little bit more seriously on the fashion sense, even though punk rock, you do what you want and who cares or whatever. But I think looking back, it would have been cool to have a little bit more of identity in the fashion sense. And that's kind of weird.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I mean, if you guys are all up there and one person's wearing like a collared shirt and the person wearing shorts and shit, and you're all over the place, it's gonna there is something about that where it is kind of like forgettable almost.
Yeah, and I don't take bands seriously. Like I mean, I love them, like the Lagwagons or whatever, but I don't take them seriously. Like NoFX's, and those guys can play their you know what off, like nobody's business. But I don't take them seriously, and just their style and their lyrics or whatever it is. We didn't, and a lot of it's like the look. People wearing shorts and like look at all those bands that like 3 guitar players and they're all wearing like surfing shorts and like I don't know, and backwards hats from the '90s. I don't know. I never got into it. I just didn't get it, but. That to me is a waste. It's just a waste. I mean, take it seriously. I mean, you don't have to be like a like, the Clash, they were uniforms. I mean, like, make no mistake, they were tailored and they were manufactured in the fashion sense. And same with the Jam, but the Damned certainly weren't.
But I feel like some of those bands though, like that was their normal wear off the stage.
Not the Clash for sure. Not the Jam.
Yeah.
Not in the early days. No, the Jam were, Burton suits or whatever it was. And they were trying to be like the Beatles, and that was their influence. And the Clash were definitely manufactured, and they had a whole fashion team. They had a girl that created some of that. Oh, for sure. But also Paul Simonon was he was an artist, and that was a lot of that clothing came from his idea, and he created it for the band and what their style was going to be like. But I don't know if those guys, I mean, except for Paul, I think the other guys were, Mick Jones was into Mott the Hopple, and he was a bit of a hippie, and same with Joe until he got into the 101ers, and he was into pub rock. The Pistols were probably the closest thing to just getting up there and doing it and not having that storyline behind them. They didn't have anybody other than Malcolm as far as getting them shows. But
yeah, I guess I was thinking of like some of the bands out there. I think it was some bands would get up there and they'd like the Casualty or something, like you'd wear like full on, or the Exploited.
Yeah.
Like they'd have like, they would just kind of live that. And I was like, man, that shit that's just time consuming as fuck.
It's a lot of work. Chains and the thing and the spikes. And yeah, it's a fine line because you look at it and you say, oh, that's cool and stuff. But to me now it's all manufactured. And the guy's like, listen, you're 35. I don't think you're going to Whole Foods and that thing. So it's like, let's be real. You know what I mean? But at least for us, I mean, we were real, at least. That's just what we wore. I mean, that's what we wore every day. But it's just, when I look at videos now, I'm like, God, we look like a bunch of clowns. We should at least like wore something that's like, Harlan was the closest. And I give him a lot of credit.
Yeah.
I told him this a few months ago too. I go, I got to give you a lot of credit. He was like the true, like he cared and he wore the right stuff and for the most part, but Corey and I just wore whatever. I mean, it didn't matter, you know, as a drummer, half the time your shirt goes off and no one sees you because you're burning up and you're going to die back there. But no one really didn't really matter for me fashion sense wise, but Harlan took it a little bit more. He was a little bit more on the ball as far as that goes.
So then how did you guys, so you put the releases out, you're doing some touring, you're playing, getting like kind of popular locally. So like, how did that lead to Doctor Strange?
That would probably be a Harlan question, really, because Bill would start booking shows. I think he was booking shows. I think he just decided, like a lot of guys, decided to start putting out bands on a label and start a label. And he liked us. And I don't know how we met Bill. I think, you know, Harlan knew him. I'm not sure through what avenue they had a relationship, but yeah, that's probably, I don't even know how Harlan eventually met Bill and how that all came about. Just that, you know, this guy's interested in that kind of thing. And then we got friendly with him, and then you've got Face to Face, you know, ourselves and Voodoo Glow Skulls and a few other bands and Guttermouth, all kind of around a year away or apart from each other. And he was signing some good bands at that point.
Yeah. Actually, I forgot how the Don't Turn Away was on Doctor Strange first. It's like the black artwork. So you guys were all getting signed at the same time on Doctor Strange?
It was all within, all at the same time. So I remember I knew Face to Face because we would play at the Voodoo Glow Skulls guy, the singer, I think, owned a record store. So we played at his place in his record store. Then Face to Face would play. So it would be us, and then the Bull Weevils would come through town. So it'd be the Bull Weevils, us, Voodoo Glow Skulls, Face to Face, and just playing Riverside in that area. And we did a bunch of shows like that. At his record store, we played a couple. And at that point, same old thing. It's just young kids, you know, out of high school or whatever, and just playing shows, and word eventually starts spreading. Eventually, I mean, I knew Face to Face was going to be bigger. You know, I could just tell because of their style or whatever. I knew they were going to do well. I was never really a huge. I mean, in the harder core stuff like Guttermouth or whatever, I knew they were going to do well, and Voodoo had their thing, and it's like Epitaph had those bands, you know what I mean? Their core, like the Pennywises and so on, and Bad Religion, and then Doctor Strange started, you know. Then he had Face to Face, us, and Voodoo, and Guttermouth.
Those are four totally different sounds. I mean,
yeah,
you guys could all be in the same show and it would make sense, but all of you would stand out completely, like on your own. Like none of your sounds really bled together, I think.
No, and I think that was another reason we really liked the UK stuff, is because like the Damned didn't sound like the Jam. The Jam didn't sound like the Buzzcocks. Like those bands, and the Stranglers, this is some of our favorite bands. You would never confuse any of those. Like those bands were so completely different. But in our scene, we thought so many bands sounded the same, and they were starting to get that cookie cutter thing, and then we hated it.
You said earlier that you guys would get up and play live, and you'd want to just kick so much ass that everyone remembered you guys over the other bands. So were some of those shows with like Guttermouth or Voodoo Glow Skulls or Face to Face where you took that attitude to the stage then?
No, I think that came a little bit later. That was just, I think, no, I mean, in the sense that you always want to play well and play better and show, and to us, in a sense, like show off that your repertoire, your brand, or whatever you want to call it, has value and so on and so forth. But yeah, I mean, we took it seriously that we always wanted to be the best band on the bill. I mean, always. I don't know what band wouldn't want to, you know what I mean? I don't think we were too much different on that side of things, but even if we were all friends, I'd still wanted to play better than Face to Face. And I thought they were competitor wise, they would be more of a competitor than Voodoo, because we were a little bit closer to the same vibe as, you know what I mean, to Face than we would be to Voodoo. So I'm like, always want to like play as good as we can, especially if we were playing with Face to Face, and when we started playing with Green Day and the bigger bands, like definitely wanted to put our best foot forward. So
how was it on Doctor Strange? Did he like how were they as a label?
Oh, great guy. I mean, first of all, he was just a great guy. That was the first thing, is that he was a good dude, as they say. You know, that's the first thing, is that he was a good guy, and that, you know, he really looked out the band. And it's flattering when somebody likes your band and tries to push your band. But he was still small at that time. It wasn't like we weren't like getting. When Green Day started getting big, we would give Billy some of our tunes and try to get it signed. You know, like, hey, listen, if you're going to be at Sony, drop this in their mailbox. So, and they would like try to, they would sit there, and when they were getting touted, and they would go, people would be buying them lunches and dinners and paying for all these things. And trying to sign Green Day and all that stuff. And he would go around and try to push bands that he liked and stuff at the same time, which was cool. But what was your question again? Sorry, I got off on a tangent.
Like, how was it? Like, how was he as a label? Like, how was Doctor Strange as a label?
I mean, support wise, you can only do so much as a young guy with, not a huge distribution deal. So great guy. I mean, great label. I mean, we could have, who knows where we would have ended up if it wasn't for him, because he was so into the scene at that point, and he was putting on shows too. People knew about him. And so he had good bands, and face to face, the stronger the label is, the more the bands that are on that label get attention. So if people are really into Voodoo and Guttermouth and face to face, that helps us because we're on the same label. Hats off to Bill to have the foresight to sign some, pretty good bands early on. But yeah, great guy. And he did his absolute best. So no qualms there. That's for sure.
Was there like tour support, like when you guys went on the road, or like how did that?
It was never like that. I mean, it wasn't, we weren't that big at that point, and there wasn't funds available for that. No, it was pretty much all self-financed, and meaning, we bought 3 weeks worth of top ramen and, basically lived off of soup and noodles and, and that kind of stuff. So we would go into Carl's Jr. somewhere, and someone would get like $1.99, like all you can eat salad bar, and then keep rinsing the plate, and then the next guy in the band would go. And so we would eat like salad for, Harlan always ate a little healthier than we did, but there was no money. I mean, it was like you get out of the show and you're not even a couple $100. I don't remember it making money. Like, you know what I mean? Somebody put you up. That was somebody put you up. That was it. You didn't have to pay for a room or something. We stayed with a lot of guys. The governor of Arkansas's like kid put us up in his house while his dad was like away or something. We stayed in this mansion one time, and then and we had Corey's girlfriend, I think she had friends in Oregon, so we were able to stay there for 2 days when we were in Oregon. So, you do that as much as you possibly can to save money and not driving as much and get out of the van and that kind of thing. So,
how far out into the country when you were in the band did you guys tour? Did you make it all the way to the East Coast?
Yeah, I believe so. I think we did, or did we not? No, I don't think we did. Not when I was playing, because we did the Pacific Northwest, and then we did the Midwest, and I think we did the Midwest, and then I think that was the second round, and then the first one we did was like the Pacific Northwest. So once they started doing, I think that was like 95, they started doing like the East Coast stuff more so, Boston and things like that. I don't think we played in Chicago. I think that was as far Midwest that we went. Midwest, we played in Chicago. I think that was it during my time.
So, like, another point too, though, tour support's one thing of giving you money, and if your van breaks down or you guys need to eat or whatever. But the other thing would be if you're showing up to shows and kids are saying like, "Yeah, we've heard of you guys before you got here." Like, did you see any of that?
Oh yeah, for sure. So what we would do is we would, people would start writing us a little bit and talk about their town, and so we would either stay at their house or we'd find out, like, Harlan, a lot of times he would just send out stuff and mail like CDs and whatever it was, 7 inches to fans out of his bedroom. Once we started building up a little bit of like, oh wow, we have this little place in Montana, Missoula, has like 20 of our records, and people keep asking us to come out there. Maybe we should put that on the tour route. And that's how that came about, where we would end up going. It'd be really cool because you'd either show up and nobody knew who you were, and there'd be one person, or you show up and like you pulled up in the van and like people would run out to the van and say, "Oh my God, they're here." So it's just really kind of,
that's dope.
It was really, really, you either get that, geez, nobody knows who you are, or they would come out running out of the club waiting for you to arrive because you're a touring band. So a little of both. You pull up and play it, it's the same thing. It's like you playing these is horrific. You play anywhere, so you don't know where you're playing, and you pull up and you're playing it. I remember one gig got canceled that the promoters weren't there, and we were so pissed because it was like a skate park, and we were like, this is perfect. And it ended up like never happening. And we ended up just taking the day off, I think. I can't remember where it was, but we sat there and like, well, this is it. What time is it? Isn't there supposed to be somebody here? I'm like, too bad. It was like a skate park or something, and we ended up not playing or something of that sort. That would happen. And then you get the shows that everybody comes out and it's like busier or packed more than you thought, and there's kids everywhere. And then the shows that you pull up and there's like, 6 people at a bingo parlor. And when one kid that liked your CD, that you're like, oops, okay. So, but you don't really think, some of those shows, I tell you, you played better for that one kid that put you on the bill and booked your band at the bingo parlor, because there's nobody there and you really let it rip because you're pissed. And so you played a little more, aggressively, or you put on a good show. But we never really you play the show and you play as hard as you can, and then you just go to the next spot and you don't think about it. But the cool part is pulling up at each different show is that the anticipation of whether it's going to be a busy, packed, people have heard of you. So you're always surprised. You don't know from city to city or state to state, whatever it is, show to show, if it's going to be a big crowd, a small crowd, an intimate crowd. A lot of times you're playing people's like mom's abandoned garage or whatever, and there was like 50 kids right in your face, and that was like the best show. And then you played a show that was actually a club, and there were like 8 people there. That was horrible, and so you just don't. But that's all part of it, and that's what's great about it. It's like some of those shows that were just those intimate, like living room shows that people were writing, like literally in your face. Like you had like maybe 10 inches between you and whoever else was in front of you. Those were the great shows.
Oh, fuck yeah. Yeah, club shows suck, man. Unless you're on unless you're the band that's selling it out or you're with a band that's selling it out, to play at a club. I said this in another interview, like to be up on a stage at a club, it can be the best club in the country. And if there's fucking 10 people in front of you, you're like, this is fucking pointless. This is the worst.
Yeah. You're like, this is, but it's part of it, but we played, I think our first show was like in North Hollywood, was like our first real show.
What was that?
It's called the FM Station. It's like, I think our first real show. And that was like, same old thing, you invite all your friends. And I always said, you're getting somewhere when none of your friends show up and you still have a great crowd. That's when you know you're getting somewhere, because nothing's worse than just begging your friends every weekend. We're playing on, like, well, I just saw you like 8 times like the last 2 weeks. It's like, eventually you can't, just because you have 14 good friends that follow you around, that's not like going to make or break the band. You know what I mean? It's nice because they're loyal and they're your buddies, but eventually you got to play to people who've never heard you and that they spread the word.
Well, plus, like, your friends always wanted to be on the guest list, too, so they never paid shit. So you weren't really making any money with your friends showing up there.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. But we didn't start making like any kind of coinage until probably like a little bit later. You don't think about it. You don't think about, as long as you can get to the next spot, you're okay. You don't really think of monetarily what.
Well, it's not like you were expecting to leave and have a steak dinner. It was more of like your friend. That was more stressful when all our friends would show up, because they'd be like, "Yo, on the list." I'm like, "Yo, there's fucking 6 of you. We can't put all of you." And then someone would bring a girlfriend and stuff. And I was like, this whole guest list thing, I just fucking hated it.
Yeah. It's eventually though. We didn't invite once we got a little bit bigger, we didn't invite our friends were going to drive to Riverside. You know what I mean? That was only an issue when we were local. And then when we started playing out of the city and into different states and tour, then you're not inviting your friends to those shows anyway. So it was only when you're really, really young and you start playing a few of those shows that are bars and stuff that you'd put half a dozen people on there. Then once you got a little bit bigger, they weren't really coming to a lot of those shows unless you're local.
How many tours did you personally go on with the band before you quit?
2. Yeah. The first and the second, and then I think, yeah. And then they did, I think 2 more after. They did a small one, I think a little bit. They went to Europe. So they went to Europe. I quit just before they went to Europe, I think. I should have stuck it out and just done Europe and then quit after, but it is what it is.
No regrets, man.
No, yeah. I mean, I wish I would have went to Europe for obvious reasons.
But what year was it, though? Like, real quick. So we're going to work up to that. So 94. So between then, though, I'm looking at it, and you got I was saying before, because you've got the full length, so you've got, let's see, you got One in 90, you got Pressure, you got Now, and then Clobberer's later after you're out of the band, and then you got your first 7-inch, you got a Look Away, so that's a split with, it's like Look Away Should Have Known, and so it's a Collision Records Doctor Strange split, and then 90, and then you got like Nowhere, Impressible, Holiday, Girl with the Purple Hair. So like you guys are putting out a lot. It seems like you're putting out a lot of stuff between just 2 tours. Like it seems like you were more focused on recording than you were on touring.
Yeah, not intentionally. I think that the tours, not intentionally really, because if you can't tour on a 7-inch, and we only had, you know what I mean, at that point we toured both records. We weren't touring for singles, so you toured for Pressure and we toured for Now, you know what I mean, and then they toured for Clobberer. So, but Clobberer, I was still on. They took like 2 songs from, so I'm still on Clobberer. They took a couple songs, from one of our sessions and put it on Clobberer. So technically, I'm still actually, when I really think about it, but I'm still on Clobberer technically, a couple songs, which I really like. But some of the B-sides were, a couple of my favorite songs were 7-inches that weren't on records.
So before we get into like why you quit, like what's the story? Do you know the story behind like the character with like the one that's holding the gun, but it's also the same character on Holiday? Like how'd that come about?
We always wanted to have like some kind of, when the Pennywise had the logo and Black Flag had a logo, bands had logos. They had something to identify the band with. even Offspring later, whatever it was. But we always wanted to find something that'd be cool. You know what I mean? That would identify the band. And once we started to get like a second guitar player around that time, like Freak, Holiday kind of years, he was an artist. And so he started drawing stuff like, this guy's like really good. And I'm not sure how that particular character came about, but he would just put stuff together. I think right when he started putting the stuff together, I was just leaving. So I don't know how they came up with that particular character. But the guitar player was an artist. So.
Yeah, as soon as you see the gun, it's a girl, right? Yeah, it's a girl holding the gun. It's like as soon as you see that, you know it's Rhythm Collision. Like that was so it worked. Obviously that was
right.
That was later on,
for sure, 100%. Yeah, and then that's and it was cool. It did work, and we just didn't think of it early on. I remember when Jay from Bad Religion used to say, just put something out, and that's why Bad Religion starts with a B, because when people are shopping for records, they're going to start in the A's and they're going to go from A to Z. We don't want to be in the W's by the time they've already bought the record. I thought that was hysterical. I'm like, well, maybe there's some truth to that. I don't know. And he's like, well, we're Rhythm Collision. We're not changing that. So we made the cover like nice and fluorescent green. I mean, that was part of opposite of the green that's on the Clash, but also bright enough to where it would stand out in a 7-inch bin.
I was going to point that out. Like when I was looking at that artwork, I was like, that was an aggressive move doing the neon green because it really makes it pop. And that is a thing. Like if you're sharing shelf space or wherever, you have to have something where, it's also a gamble too for some people just to buy you based on your name and the artwork and stuff. But you do have that small handful of people that would do that, especially back then. I mean, now I don't really know how that really works because there's not really a lot of attention. I don't think that's paid. People aren't really paying attention. I think the artwork because it's all digital.
Yeah, it's a shame too. It's just horrible. just brutal. Even though, I mean, people say, well, vinyl's not a resurgence. Yeah, it is, but it is because CDs are taking a backseat to digital, and vinyls basically, because everything is digital now, they're not buying CDs, and now the only other thing is vinyl, so they go back to vinyl. So it's not like vinyl's outsold CDs for the first time, and actually, well, no one's buying CDs because of digital, so that's the only reason that vinyl seems like it's going through the roof, which it is, but it's not that crazy. Where it's either, if it's not digital, like I was in a band last year, and I really wish we would have done 7 inches only because I'm old school. But there's no point. You're not going to sell any. No one's going to have it. You know what I mean? It's like I love to collect them. I love to have them, and they sound better and yada yada. But we ended up putting everything out. They didn't even want to put it on a CD. I'm like, no, you got to put it on a CD at least. But now it's digital. I mean, that's just the way it is. You're not making money on Spotify.
Oh, yeah, you're not making shit. Did you guys do? Because I know back in the day. I mean, I think I know the answer is no, but a lot of bands when they would do 7 inches, that was the time where there was the ability to put color vinyl out. Did you guys have the ability to, or did you
loved it?
Oh, did you actually put the first one on
a lot?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, red. Yeah, I was in multiple. Like we did almost every one of our records, even our 7 inches, came in like 3 or 4 different colors.
Oh shit, that's awesome.
Yeah, we were really into doing different colors.
Did you do like the first record? Like, were you able to do it on like?
It was red.
Green? Oh, it was red.
Yeah, it was red vinyl.
It's such a missed opportunity. Cool, it's like the fucking green, man.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think Holiday, was in a couple different colors, and I think it was white vinyl. Attack from Both Sides, I think, is white vinyl. So yeah, we were definitely into that early on, colored vinyl.
Wait, so the first 7 inch you did put it out in green, like as one of the releases?
No, not the first one.
Oh, just red.
The second one, A Look Away had multiple colors, and I think Freak and Holiday had multiple colors, and then I think Attack from Both Sides was white vinyl. I can't remember, but yeah, a few of the, it's also cost, if it's makes sense at that time. Sometimes it like didn't make sense cost wise, and other times like they're having deals or whatever. But yeah, we like the colored vinyl thing. We thought that was cool.
Yeah, even now, because I'm a huge vinyl collector now. I've really got into it for the first time in like the last like 3 years, and it's always a nice surprise when like I'm looking at the Far Side, Bizarre Ride 2 right now, and then they have it's 2 records, and one's like a clear blue and one's like a clear yellow. And it's like a surprise when you take it out. You're like, oh shit, man, this is fucking awesome.
We did. I was in a band called Para Elite, an Oi band, and we did one in like Oxblood. It was like they just did really cool stuff now.
That's fucking dope. Yeah, I love that.
Really cool.
So let's get into, and we'll start wrapping this up. So like, because around this time, you're on your second tour, and then you have these releases, but then you leave the band in 94, and then the band goes on. So let's kind of like lead up to like what led up to you leaving, and like how did that look? Like what happened?
I mean, to me, I wanted at this point, the Face to Faces and the Green Days, and they were getting big, like huge, right? Big at this point, like Dookie and all that stuff. And I thought early on that that's where we would be at that stage. And I didn't see that happening anytime soon. And I was trying to slow things down tempo wise, like the Alkaline Trio tempo, that kind of stuff. But they were going faster and faster. And that's when I think we started butting heads a little bit, where they were like faster. And I was trying to see how slow I could go to see if I can still get by without it being just hardcore. I was just getting bored with the hardcore stuff personally. To me, I was bored to tears just going, do that for a decade to me. So that's why on Now, you'll see there's a lot of different time changes, like tempo changes, and like it's all kind of all over the place. And it was a conscious effort to do it a little bit different. Like now, I'm more proud of now than I was then, because nobody was doing that. Like it was pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of music in between stuff, and punk bands weren't doing that because you lose the audience. People they're like fast, harder, faster. That's how it was. To me, I was getting bored of tears, so I was trying to slow and do different tempos and different beats during the Now time. And then after that, I saw that they were definitely not really into that as much as I was kind of slowing it down and getting a little bit more mid-tempo mixed with different things. That's when I started kind of, I think, during the recording of Holiday, I think maybe, is when I think I left. They finished it without me. I said, I'm done. I can't. Or it's right after I think we finished the recording. And it was nothing other than it wasn't like, oh, we're touring too much, or it was just really, I didn't see the when you're 7, 8, 9 years into it and you're playing in Arkansas for like 12 kids, you're like, maybe this is it. As it turned out, it wasn't. Yeah, they just, that was really why I left. I didn't, that's it. I just made a call and I said, I think I'm done. I can't, and that was it.
And they kept going on until 2000?
No, well, I think what happened was, so shortly after Corey had a good friend, I think Sean, who's a great drummer, by the way, and he took over, and they started writing songs because I think they were starting to think about Europe at that point, and we were talking about it. And then I left, and then they still wanted to go to Europe, obviously. And then I think Sean came aboard. Then they finished the record with Sean, and they did a couple tours, I think, a couple singles, and Clobberer with Sean. And then that, I think, was from late 94, 95 to 97, I think. That was it, a couple of years. They did a lot in those 2 years. And then I think after like 97, they had broke up, or they parted ways with everybody. I think Harlan continued on because he still had a lot of songs written. And then he released another Collision LP, Bombs Away, with totally different guys. I think that might have been 2000 or 2001. And we were all different planets or different whatevers by that point.
I mean, Clobberer seems to be the one, because I remember that was like right around the time where I was getting into the punk scene and then the whole underground stuff. So Clobberer was the thing that like stood out to me as the more popular CD. So did that one do the best? Okay, so there we go.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, the first one wasn't it wasn't released on CD. I mean, it wasn't released on I shouldn't say CD. It never had its own release on CD.
Gonacox or Pressure? Oh, wait, I think you cut out. Oh, there you go. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you cut out there. But you said earlier that you because Pressure, it's on Spotify, it says like 2019.
Yeah, it's just one of those errors that they just are knuckleheads, and yeah. But that's I just put it out because I wanted to hear it on Spotify and wanted to put some. It never had its own release, basically. So I made a CD of Pressure, which we never had its own release. But I think it would have done a lot better if we would have just threw it on the Now CD as a bonus. But Clobberer is definitely, at that point, I think I said a few months ago, I said, why'd you guys quit then? You're finally like kind of really getting there at that point. And they're like, well, no one was getting along, and it's like the tours were crazy and there's too much, and everybody was having kids, and I think that was about it. I don't think it was much more than that.
When you were still in the band, did you guys all get along and just like you just got more? Okay.
Yeah. Toward the end, we got into it. I mean, Harlan and I a little bit more, only because I was trying, he was the singer and he wanted the songs a little bit faster. And I was like, I'm trying to slow him down. So that was a little bit of friction, but we were never like fisticuffs, and we were we never got to anything of that sort at all.
So was it kind of a bummer when Clobberer came out and you saw that it got like a little bit more traction? Where you were just
no.
Fuck.
Nah, not at all.
You're just done. You were like, that's cool.
Oh yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Some people, maybe. I was never, plus I was still on it. So I was still on it. It wasn't, you know what I mean? So, but at that point also, I wasn't involved in the scene. So I wouldn't know that they got a lot of traction or that it was doing that well. I wasn't like, I'd separated myself, not on purpose, but I was moving in a different direction at that point. And, I wasn't really, and I wasn't playing the drums at that point either at that point. So I wasn't involved with the scene. I didn't really care. And, other than I wish everybody well and all that kind of stuff. We were all pretty good about that, but no, not at all.
So when they got back from tour and stuff or whatever, did you guys still hang out, or did they just kind of?
No, we were all living in different places, and it took, I think Corey and I stumbled on each other. We were both living in Studio City, like near each other. And I think we ran into each other at Blockbuster, and that kind of rekindled like, oh, we should get together sometime. And that was like the first time, I think. And then we all started talking again, and what are you doing? What are you doing? And yeah, then we just kind of all reconnected. Right when they stopped, I started again. And then I went strong for like another decade.
What, playing drums?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you said you've been playing. You're playing up until everything closed down. So once you left, like how long was it until you just went down that new path?
7. I think it was like 7 years I hadn't played.
Oh wow,
that's at all.
Fucking gap.
Yeah, it was. And then I went into a band that was faster than the rhythm cushion. So I had my work cut out for me. So these guys were young and they're in their like early 20s, mid 20s. And they were, somebody passed my name on to them and they said, hey, we're in a punk band. I'm like, do I really want to? And I brought my kit and we played and they were cool and the music was cool. And next thing I know, we were practicing 3 days a week. I always say jokingly, I didn't learn to play drums till way after the rhythm cushion. Yeah, we played a bunch of shows and we did a couple EPs and it was fat. It was cool, great stuff. And I tried to be in a different band each time. And then I was in a mod band and then an oi band we did 2 records with. And then it was like an emo power pop thing. And so every time I tried to do something that I hadn't done before on purpose. So I would search out bands and look through ads and just got lucky, really, like 4 or 5 different bands. I was in a mod band and then a oi band and then the fast hardcore stuff right after the Collision. And then more of an emo style thing a couple years ago.
That's fucking cool, man. So I saw something on the Facebook page. There was like it was on the Instagram page. It's like a flyer with you guys in Green Day.
Mm-hmm.
What was that show? There's a black and white one on Instagram, and then I
played
another one.
We played with them like so many times. It just depends on which flyer, because we played with them a million times. So I don't know which one.
Well, there's one on Instagram. It's black and white, but I thought I saw. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting mixed up with the Good Riddance.
There was Shea Cafe.
Yeah.
We played with them there. We played with them in Santa Barbara with like Youth Brigade and Pennywise. A lot of times. Then we played with them. Yeah, UCLA. It was just us and Green Day. And I remember it because it was during the finals of the NBA finals with the Bulls. And I remember we couldn't start the show. I'm sitting on my drum stool waiting for the game to end so we could play. Yeah, Shea Cafe and the Cooperage. UCLA, because Harlan was going to school there at the time, so we had a connection there. But yeah, we played with them a bunch of times.
Was it cool? Like, because they broke 90. What was it? 2, 94? I always forget. Basically around the time that you guys were playing with them. So like, was that something when you're playing with them, and I'm guessing in casual conversation, people probably like, that's the coolest thing you played with Green Day. Like,
yeah, that's what they say.
Is it as cool that? Yeah, is it like, what is your thought on that?
It wasn't really.
Yeah, okay.
Not really.
I was kind of getting to. It's like, you're like, all right.
No, I mean, it's like, your boys, and like you play with them a lot of times. And like I remember loaning Trey my kick, and you're just all growing up and playing at the same spots. I would think every time we played with Green Day, the thing I would think about is, cool, it's going to be a busy show. It's going to be packed because they have a great following. And I knew that we'd play to a lot of people. That was all I knew.
It's just so wild. Like, it's such a crazy part. It's like piece of history where you're playing with bands, and like my old band, like there was a couple bands we played with, and then you'd see that band just skyrocket into the stratosphere, and you're like, holy shit. And you could tell though, like there was some bands you're like, that they're just fucking going and they're on a rocket, and you're like, oh,
that's how I knew Face to Face was going to go there, and Green Days, and there's a few bands that I knew were going to go and get pretty big. I mean, nobody on the sense that Green Day did, of course, or Offspring. Nobody really predicted that. Well, I mean, I kind of knew Green Day was going to do something big, but I was watching a tour video with Harlan like a few months ago, and he said, "You see that guy right there?" Or like some show somewhere, and I was in Chicago, and he paused it. The guy that little kid that just walked by, he's like, "Yeah," he's like, "That's the guy in Rise Against." I'm like, "You gotta be kidding me!" So the kid was like 12 at one of our shows, and now he's the guitar player or bass player for Rise Against.
Wait, he was the singer Rise Against, or he was Joe?
No,
who
bass
was the,
player, I
oh,
think.
yeah. So he was in 88 Fingers Louie first, and then
Maybe it was that guy. I'm not sure.
yeah,
But
that's crazy. Holy
it was like,
shit.
hey, see that little kid that just walked by the camera? Yeah, I'm gonna rewind it. I'm like, this kid? He's like, yeah, that guy's in Rise Against. I'm like, Jesus.
Damn. I mean, that's what, yeah, that's their story. Like they're watching you play, and they're probably like, yeah, man, I saw all these punk shows back
Yeah, that
then.
was I'm sure there was a lot of little stories like that, but Youth Brigade was a good show, but for me the biggest was the Bad Religion in Mexico. Still was the hardcore show that we ever did. I think
Wait, talk about that.
it was when you play. If you read in the book, right, where they talk about iguanas in Mexico and Jay talks about it.
Yeah.
That's what the same show. So
Holy
basically,
shit.
when you play, there's no rules. There's like no like IDing. People could be dead and you wouldn't know. You're stepping over bodies. It was like 3 stories and people were just jumping off like the balcony, just going poof. Like it's just, and it wasn't that it was violent in that sense. It was just no control. Like it wasn't like bouncers. It was just a free for all. But yeah, it was this. I remember the guy from 7 Seconds was in a band called Drop Acid and they opened up for us. And I remember him saying, we're getting out of here, like right after. I'm like, you gonna stick around? He's like, no, we're gone. And you're talking to the guy from 7 Seconds in a hardcore band saying, I'm out of here. And I just sent him, just last week, I sent Kevin Seconds a picture of that show. I'm like, hey, we played with you at the blah, blah, blah. He's like, oh, this is a great shot. I'm like, yeah. And we were talking. And I'm like, yeah, he was like, I'll never forget it. There's weird things that you remember. But yeah, he was like, I'm like, are you going to stick around? He's like, no, we're out of here.
That's crazy. Was that the show where Jay's talking about how he's like this dance floor just started looking like Swiss cheese? It was just like holes just started developing.
Yeah, that and the other ones that like the Olympic Auditorium was like that too. Very heavy place to play. I mean, we didn't play anything that hardcore. I mean, Olympic Auditorium was nuts because it was so big, and you'd have 3 pits going at one time in circles of like 80 to 100 people, 3 different circles of pits in one place. Yeah, it was crazy.
Is that when you guys? So that's when you were playing with Bad Religion at that place, and they would do this for you guys?
Yeah, there was you don't remember a lot of it because it's so long ago, but now that we just rewatched it, I'm like, wow, that was a huge pit because you're focusing, you're looking, and same old thing, you can't see past like 20, 30 people or whatever, But once I watched the video, I'm like, man, that place was packed. Like you forget.
That's crazy.
And there's just swirls of bodies just going like just like, holy moly. And you don't think about it at the time, and you don't, unless you're watching videos of, it's like we had to kind of revisit it. I'm like, oh man,
damn,
that was great.
Well, cool, man. Well, I'm gonna wrap this up. But before I ask the last 2 questions, were any like crazy story or funny story that you've never got a chance to tell that you want to like tell?
Not really. There's not that many. There's a lot, but not a lot that I remember. I mean, the funny one was obviously, smashing the RV into the Canadian border. That's a good one. Yeah, not a lot on my side. I mean, I wish I had, a better answer, but not really.
That's fine. You just never know. You never know.
There's just so many little things that you know what I mean? Especially, 40 years later or 30 something that you just, sometimes we'll sit down as a group and just reminiscing. I'm like, oh my God, and then you'll start remembering all these things that happened. Yeah. But to kind of reflect on it, would take, I couldn't recall anything other than we spoke about,
Yeah, no, it's totally fine. Cool, man. So, all right. So I know with 2 questions. One, was there anything you'd like to plug? It could be about something, like it could be anything about like what you're doing. You had mentioned before, like trying to put some like a release out, or it could be just some love for a friend who's doing something.
Nothing really to plug. I mean, for anybody who's like obviously a Collision fan that just kind of keeps supporting the social media thing and, commenting on those things. And, a lot of that stuff is available now, and listen to, if you hadn't heard, Collision Course, which is all of our A's and B sides, you know what I mean, that is now out on Spotify. Like those things would be cool if people kind of rediscovered some of those songs that they haven't heard before because they weren't available. I think that's the biggest thing I would say. And to just keep the scene alive. People always say move forward, but it's okay to look back and have a little passion from where you came from. It's okay. You know what I mean? Like if you're 50 or 60, but I mean, I live it every day. I listen to the same thing I did when I was 18, 17, you know what I mean? And I love every minute of it. So no, that's about it. I mean, I have a studio, my house now. I record, I play guitar, drums, bass, and I may put that out on my own. But other than that, no, just keep the scene going. I mean, just keep plugging away.
Cool, man. Actually, that kind of goes into the last question, but you might be able to kind of build on that more. So I was end this with, what scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
The scene ethics. Give me, an example. Like,
It's kind of like I started wording it that on like episode 7, and I think it really should be like what kind of like punk rock ethics, but I just base it on the things that you took from playing shows.
it's individuality. It's individuality, which was a big part of it back then. It's still a huge part of being, yourself, and that's still one of the main things. Whatever you're doing, I take that, and everything I do is I don't, I'm smart enough to conform when I have to, being an adult, but I still have those ethos of the individuality, and that's what I took from punk rock, and being, to me, is always about being a little different. I'm really proud of being a punk and what the whole scene created, and I was a part of, even though it was a small part, but being a part of it is still something I'm really proud of as an adult and middle-aged man at this point. But yeah, I take those things. I'll take them to my grave for sure.
Bonus.
Another quick story was when we were touring, and one of our final shows was in San Jose, and I think we got the show through Lars Fredriksson. At that point, I think he was kind of emailing us about the scene, and he liked our 7-inch and so on, and I think he got us the show up there. We got off the bus, and he was welcoming us as we exited the tour van, and at that point, he was in and out of bands, like played with the UK Subs and all these other bands that he was trying to, get into the scene with at that time. And we were joking, like, hey, aren't you that guy that's in like 10 bands? We didn't really know him that well. And so we played the show, and during the set, we played a cover of the Stiff Little Fingers, and he came up and sang on it. So that was really cool. And after the show, we stayed at either his place or a friend of his, and we were just kind of having beers after the show. And I remember him playing us a cassette tape of a new project he was working on. And we were like, yeah, it sounds pretty good. Good luck. Turned out to be a little band called Rancid. Early on, maybe it was our second or third single, we got hooked up with Chaz Ramirez, who at that point had done Social D, and he was an OC guy, engineer, producer. And he was getting, pretty well known for doing big bands. And we scheduled a recording session with him, and we started recording, and I remember, like, literally, he was really paranoid. He'd be walking around and asking us for money, like, after, like, the first song, make sure you guys have cash, and, I'm sure at that point, he was probably dealing with a lot of unsavory characters, but we thought, man, we're not those kind of people, but it was, anyway, it was kind of funny. But we ended up finishing it, and I don't even know what happened to the recordings. And I think we just left. We thought, this is kind of weird. I think we just left. I don't remember what happened. I think we paid him and left. I don't remember if there was a finished product, to be honest with you. But years later, we found out, unfortunately, poor guy fell off a scaffolding and I think passed away, broke his neck. Not a great story, but that's a story. I also remember when we were recording Pressure, Brett from Bad Religion was producing and engineering it with Donnell, and those guys were both like heavy chain smokers. And I remember just ashes all over this expensive desk, and we were just like unable to breathe. And as a drummer, I was like, getting killed in here. I remember that, and they would have this encyclopedia out, and they would always flip through it, almost like you'd put a finger on a spinning globe and point to a city or state, country, whatever. And they would test each other on the meaning of the words. They were always into learning. I thought that was cool. And I remember playing Fugazi, and he's like, do you guys think this is good recording? We were like listening to cymbals, and I remember talking to Brett about it. And he was very competitive what they were doing engineering-wise. I remember that as well, which was cool.